He stood on the pew and shouted, "He came back! Because love doesn't stay dead." Gasps filled the church. Elon Musk froze. What happened next left the congregation speechless, sparked a viral movement, and forced Elon to confront something he never expected. Was this just a child's faith, or a message meant for the world? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Easter morning. Soft golden light poured through the stained glass windows of Grace Community Church, casting colorful patterns across the pews and walls. The sanctuary was nearly full. Families gathered in their Sunday best, the air filled with the quiet rustle of hymnals and whispers of anticipation. At the front, Pastor Michael stepped up to the pulpit, Bible in hand, his voice calm and clear as he began the opening words of his Easter sermon. Just as he spoke of resurrection and hope, the wooden doors at the back creaked open. Heads turned. A tall man in a dark jacket stepped inside, holding the small hand of a boy who looked no older than 5. Whispers spread quickly. Some recognized him immediately. Elon Musk. Unmistakable even in his modest attire. But it wasn't Elon who held the congregation's attention. It was his son, X, wide-eyed and curious, scanning the room like it was a new world waiting to be explored. An usher greeted them quietly and directed them to an empty pew near the back. Elon nodded gratefully, gently guiding X to the seat. The boy sat, feet dangling, eyes fixed on the stained glass above. Pastor Michael continued speaking, his voice steady. X leaned in close to his father and whispered, not softly enough, "Why did Jesus have to die?" Elon smiled awkwardly and pressed a finger to his lips, whispering back, "We'll talk about it later." But X didn't look satisfied. He fidgeted, glanced around, and then asked again, even more earnestly, "If God loves everyone, why did Jesus get hurt? That's not what love does, right?" A few nearby heads turned. Elon's smile faded slightly. He gently rested a hand on X's knee, hoping to quiet him. But something in his son's eyes said the questions weren't over yet. Pastor Michael had just reached the solemn part of his sermon, his voice deep and reverent as he spoke of Jesus' crucifixion, the suffering, the sorrow, the weight of sin carried to the cross. The sanctuary had fallen completely still, the only sound the rustling of paper as someone shifted in their seat. Then, from the back, a small voice broke the silence. But he came back. Every head turned. X had climbed up onto the pew, standing tall on the cushion, his voice cutting through the stillness with the conviction only a child could carry. Elon immediately reached out, trying to ease him down, whispering for him to sit and be quiet. But X's eyes were focused ahead. He wasn't finished. "Came back because love doesn't stay dead," he said firmly, his small voice now trembling just slightly with emotion. "That's what Easter means." Gasps echoed softly across the sanctuary. Even Pastor Michael had paused, his mouth half open in mid-sentence. A long silence followed. Then, the pastor set his Bible down gently and looked toward the back pew. "Would you like to share more with us, young man?" Without hesitation, X stepped into the aisle and began walking forward. No fear, just purpose. As X made his way down the aisle, Elon stayed rooted in place, unsure whether to stop him or let the moment unfold. Something told him this wasn't about control, it was about listening. He thought back to the morning. They hadn't planned to attend church. It had been a quiet Easter morning, and Elon had assumed they would stay home. But at breakfast, X looked up from his cereal and asked, "Can we go to the place where people talk about Jesus?" That simple request had surprised Elon. They didn't go to church. Religion wasn't something Elon had ever focused on, and certainly not something he'd pass down. But X had been asking more questions lately, about stars, about people, about love. He'd asked, "Why do people cry when they pray?" And Can God hear someone who doesn't say anything out loud? Questions that made Elon pause. On the drive over, Elon had considered turning around. What if X didn't sit still? What if he asked questions during the service? But something had pushed him forward, a quiet curiosity about what was stirring in his son's heart. Now, as he watched X step up to the pulpit, Elon remembered a late-night conversation they'd had weeks ago. X had crawled into bed beside him and whispered, "I think Jesus is still around, not like walking around, but here, like love that doesn't stop." Elon hadn't known how to respond, so he'd just said, "That's a beautiful thought, buddy." Maybe it had been more than a thought. In that moment, Elon realized this wasn't about making a scene. It wasn't about headlines or the whispers around him. This was something pure. His son hadn't come to perform or provoke. He had come with a question in his heart, and now, for reasons Elon couldn't explain, with a message on his lips. A message that had begun long before they stepped through the church doors. As X made his way down the aisle, Elon stayed rooted in place, unsure whether to stop him or let the moment unfold. Something told him this wasn't about control, it was about listening. He thought back to the morning. They hadn't planned to attend church. It had been a quiet Easter morning, and Elon had assumed they would stay home. But at breakfast, X looked up from his cereal and asked, "Can we go to the place where people talk about Jesus?" That simple request had surprised Elon. They didn't go to church. Religion wasn't something Elon had ever focused on, and certainly not something he'd passed down. But X had been asking more questions lately, about stars, about people, about love. He'd asked, why do people cry when they pray? And can God hear someone who doesn't say anything out loud? Questions that made Elon pause. On the drive over, Elon had considered turning around. What if X didn't sit still? What if he asked questions during the service? But something had pushed him forward, a quiet curiosity about what was stirring in his son's heart. Now, as he watched X step up to the pulpit, Elon remembered a late-night conversation they'd had weeks ago. X had crawled into bed beside him and whispered, "I think Jesus is still around, not like walking around, but here, like love that doesn't stop." Elon hadn't known how to respond, so he'd just said, "That's a beautiful thought, buddy." Maybe it had been more than a thought. In that moment, Elon realized this wasn't about making a scene. It wasn't about headlines or the whispers around him. This was something pure. His son hadn't come to perform or provoke. He had come with a question in his heart, and now, for reasons Elon couldn't explain, with a message on his lips. A message that had begun long before they stepped through the church doors. The silence after X's final question was not just awkward, it was heavy. Then, slowly, like a match sparking in the dark, someone stood. A man in a Navy business suit, seated near the center aisle, turned to face another man a few rows ahead. "Mike," he said, voice rough, "I've held a grudge against you for 6 years over that business deal. I've let it fester. I told myself it was about principle, but really, I was just bitter." His hands trembled slightly. "I'm sorry." Gasps echoed through the church. Mike, the man being addressed, looked stunned. Then he gave a slow nod, eyes shining with tears. "I forgive you," he replied. "Thank you." Before the shock could wear off, a teenage girl in the back stood up, her voice cracked. "I come here every Sunday, but mostly to keep my parents happy. I've never believed. I've been angry. Angry at God for letting my grandma die. Angry that my prayers never got answered." She paused, wiping at her face. "But what if God doesn't always stop the pain? What if he just chooses to be with us through it?" She looked at X, who was back sitting next to Elon, and added softly, "He came back just like the boy said. Maybe that's what love really is." A young mother holding a baby stood next. "My husband left 6 months ago. I've been raising our daughter alone, barely getting by. I haven't been to church in 2 years, but today, something told me to come. And I don't know why, but I'm choosing to believe that this isn't the end of our story, that love can come back in new ways. One by one, the congregation transformed into something more than an audience. They became participants. Confessions filled the air like wind through a forest. Pain, healing, forgiveness. X leaned against his father, whispering softly, "See, people remember when they hear about love." Elon didn't answer at first. He looked around, watching people weep, hug, smile. The atmosphere had changed. Something sacred, fragile, and real was unfolding. He wasn't sure what to call it, a movement, a miracle, divine intervention, or maybe, just maybe, it was something planted deep in the human soul, brought to life by a child's courage to speak simple truth. Whatever it was far from over. The sanctuary had grown still again, less like silence and more like reverence. You could feel it in the way people breathed, in the way they listened now, not just with ears, but with hearts. Then, from a shadowed corner near the back, a figure slowly stood. It was Mr. Harold Wexler, a man who, though present in the community, had rarely spoken a word to anyone in years. He was known to live alone at the edge of town, a retired librarian who once had a family, but now only memories. He clutched the back of the pew in front of him as if it were holding him up. When he spoke, his voice was low, cracked from disuse. "I wasn't going to come today," he said. "I almost turned around twice, but something told me to walk through those doors." All eyes turned to him, but no one interrupted. "It's been 12 years, he went on. 12 years since I buried my son. He was only 19. An accident no one could explain. One moment he was full of life, the next, gone." He looked straight ahead, not at anyone, but somewhere beyond. "I blamed God," he admitted. "For a long time I cursed him. I stopped talking to people. I stopped talking to him. I kept thinking, if God was real and he let that happen, then I wanted nothing to do with him." A hush hung in the air, heavy with shared grief. "But today," he said, voice trembling, "a little boy reminded me what love looks like, what resurrection really means. Not just coming back to life, but coming back to hope." He drew in a shaky breath. "When I leave here, I'm going to visit my son's grave, for the first time in 8 years. Not with anger this time, but with a prayer." And with that he sat down, burying his face in his hands. Elon felt X stir beside him, and instinctively he pulled his son closer, one arm around him, hand resting on that small shoulder that somehow carried so much grace. The space between them and the others felt thinner now, like the veil between what we see and what we believe had lifted. People began sharing again, only now the stories were deeper. A woman in a wheelchair raised her hand. "I've been paralyzed since my 20s. I used to think my life ended the day my legs stopped working, but seeing this today, seeing a child speak with such faith, it's reminded me my heart still works. My voice still matters." A middle-aged man whispered that he'd been estranged from his daughter for a decade, and today he'd texted her during the service asking to meet. Even the pastor, standing quietly near the altar, wiped at his eyes. It was no longer just a church service. It was something else entirely. A breaking down of barriers, of rehearsed responses and guarded hearts. It was as if the entire room had exhaled together and finally dared to breathe in grace. And in the middle of it all, X looked up at his father and whispered something Elon would never forget. "Dad, the coming back part isn't just one day, it's every day." Elon blinked, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. That simple sentence, spoken without pretense, without fear, felt like the truth his soul had been waiting to hear. Every day, we are called to rise. Every day, we are given a chance to return, to faith, to each other, to love. And sometimes the voice that leads us there doesn't thunder from the sky. Sometimes, it comes from the quiet conviction of a child, who simply believes. The church doors opened wide, and the congregation slowly spilled into the afternoon sunlight. The energy was different now, gentler, lighter, like the hush after a healing rain. It wasn't just a service anymore. It was something sacred, unfolding in real time. Word had spread quickly. The live stream of the Easter service had gone viral within the hour. Hundreds watched from home. Dozens more had driven in from nearby towns, having seen clips online or heard whispers on social media. By the time Pastor Michael stepped outside, the front lawn of Grace Community Church was filled with people, some barefoot on the grass, others holding children or pushing strollers, eyes searching for something they couldn't quite name. Pastor Michael found X near the steps. The little boy was sitting cross-legged on the stone landing, calmly drawing something in the corner of a church bulletin with a stubby pencil. When he saw the pastor approach, he stood up, brushing grass off his knees. "Do you want to say something?" Pastor Michael asked. X looked out at the crowd and then back at the pastor. "Can I tell them what I told the people inside?" "Of course," the pastor said, stepping aside. X walked forward with a quiet confidence, standing beside the church's wooden sign. No microphone, no stage. Just his small voice in the open air. "Jesus came back," he said. "Not just once. He comes back every time someone forgives, every time someone loves instead of being mean, every time someone gives someone else hope." A hush fell over the crowd. "It doesn't have to be Easter for love to come back," he added. "It can be today. It can be tomorrow. It can be whenever you decide not to give up." There were no cheers, no applause, just stillness, people listening, absorbing. Then something beautiful happened. A local restaurant owner arrived, arms full of warm to-go boxes and paper plates. Others followed. A bakery brought fresh bread. A woman who ran a flower shop handed out lilies and daisies. It wasn't coordinated, it wasn't planned, but it became a meal, a celebration. A spontaneous revival. Elon watched it unfold from a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree near the sidewalk. He didn't want to draw attention. For once, he didn't want to lead. He just wanted to witness. His son was out there, laughing now, handing a sandwich to a man in a flannel shirt. There were no bodyguards, no speeches, just a father seeing his child not as a symbol, but as a messenger of something greater than either of them. A woman holding a phone approached Elon gently. "Mr. Musk," she said, "I'm a reporter with Channel 8. Was all this your idea?" He looked at her, then at the crowd, the sunlight, the way strangers were hugging like old friends. "No," he said quietly. "No one plans love like that." And with that, he stepped aside, letting the story speak for itself. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting a warm golden glow across the lawn of Grace Community Church. Blankets had been spread out, food shared. Strangers sat close together, laughing, listening, telling stories as if they'd known each other for years. Children played nearby. Older couples sipped lemonade on folding chairs, and in the middle of it all, on a small patch of grass beneath a dogwood tree, Elon Musk sat beside his son. They had found a quiet corner away from the crowd, but still close enough to hear the gentle hum of voices and music drifting from a speaker someone had placed near the sidewalk. Elon leaned back on his hands, letting the moment settle around him like a soft breeze. X sat cross-legged beside him, holding a crayon in one hand and a bulletin in the other, the same paper he had been sketching on earlier. His tongue poked out slightly in concentration as he drew, carefully filling in shapes with red and purple. Elon glanced over and smiled. "What are you working on?" he asked. X turned the paper toward him. It was a drawing of a heart, bright red and full, rising from the center of a wooden cross. Above it, rays of light reached outward like the sun, and underneath it, in a child's careful lettering, were the words, "Love came back." Elon stared at it for a long moment, his throat tight. "Can I take a picture of that?" he asked. X nodded. Elon pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Without thinking much about it, he opened his social media app and typed a simple caption, "This is what love looks like." He hit post, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. He wasn't thinking about impressions or shares or trends. He wasn't thinking about the millions of people who followed him. He was thinking about one moment, one image, one truth. The moment was for him, for his son, for this unexpected Easter that had somehow become a turning point. X leaned his head against Elon's arm. "Dad?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, buddy? Can we come back next Sunday?" Elon looked at him, surprised by how deeply that question hit him. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe a request to go home, or to play video games, or to build something in the garage. But this? He looked back at the people spread out across the lawn, at the old man who had forgiven himself, at the woman in the wheelchair smiling as someone read to her from the book of Psalms, at the pastor, now barefoot, sitting cross-legged in the grass as he listened to a teenager explain what forgiveness felt like. He saw more than just a gathering. He saw healing. He saw community. He saw love coming back. Elon smiled and nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, we can come back." X grinned and went back to coloring in the corners of his drawing. Across the world, the post began to take off. Within minutes, it was being shared. Within the hour, it was on news sites and faith blogs. Millions watched the clip of X speaking in church, watched the drawing appear on screens, watched the moment unfold like a sunrise. But none of that mattered to Elon. Not really. Because right now, in the quiet hush of a spring evening, surrounded by strangers who somehow felt like family, he wasn't the CEO of anything. He wasn't the public figure. He was just a father. A man sitting beside his son, feeling something stir in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Calm. That evening the house was quiet. Elon walked softly down the hallway, X's drawing tucked carefully into his hand. In the bedroom, soft lamplight cast gentle shadows as X curled beneath the blankets, eyes already heavy with sleep. Elon knelt beside the bed and pulled the covers up to his son's chin. "Dad?" X murmured sleepily. "Was that what church is always like?" Elon smiled, brushing a hand through his son's hair. "Not always," he said gently, "but maybe it should be." X nodded, eyes fluttering closed, a small Bible clutched to his chest like a treasure. Within moments, he was asleep. Elon stood quietly, watching him. Then he turned and walked to the window. The stars stretched across the night sky, brilliant and silent. He looked up and whispered, more to himself than anyone, "Sometimes we lead without meaning to." If this inspiring story touched your heart, subscribe now for more journeys into faith, family, and the courage to believe again.